Debt collection and magic words, except for value. Brought to you by yourlegallegup.com, your advantage if you're being sued by debt collectors. Some of our watchers have asked for an assessment of one of the magic word fads that's going around. The accept for value or acceptance for value response to bills. It seems to be a variation of the straw man theory, or at least to involve some of the same ideas, and certainly it appeals to the same hopes of escaping a bad situation. This video will look at the accept for value plan and give you my assessment of it. I have had a chance to look at several accept for value videos and sites. They're a little cagey, and it isn't clear to me whether there is one main source in theory, or whether there may be variations with slight differences. That's usually what happens with things like this. I'll discuss them all as if they're one idea. If you encounter something a little different, look for the fundamental similarities and don't get too hung up on specific words. The idea behind accepting for value is, as my son would say, completely whack. It appears to be based on the idea that everything is free or already paid for, which is the same thing if you know what you're doing and how to take advantage of it. Naturally, there's a conspiracy keeping hard-working, honest people like you from knowing this or from using their free resources. And the advocates of acceptance for value are supposedly the only ones who know the trick of how to do it. You could get it if you studied hard enough, they say, but who has the time for that? They'll give you what you need for a fee. Before I go deeply into the mechanics and theory of the accept for value idea, let me ask you something. If you were creating a law that you wanted to apply to everyone, would you write it in a secret code that only a few people could understand? Now, not all laws are crystal clear. In fact, really none of them are, and you might think that they were written in code, but they are designed to be known or knowable to everyone, because otherwise, how could you expect people to obey them? Whenever someone tells you that there are secret laws or secret forms or language to use to obtain some publicly available thing, you should instantly be deeply skeptical. It's almost always a scam. If everybody had an account and the money was already there for everyone to get whatever they wanted, wouldn't it make sense that politicians would love to tell you about it? I mean, some bad guy bankers might not want it since they couldn't screw you out of money, but most politicians would love to tell you about it, wouldn't they? And if everything is free, why would the bad guy bankers even want your money? If everything's free, what's the point of being rich? Okay, let's move on to the way acceptance for value is supposed to be done. To accept something for value, you apparently have to follow a specific formula. On your bill, you write accepted for value, exempt from levy. Then you sign and date it and write pay to the order of, your name all in capital letters, and put your social security number down twice, once with dashes and once without. And you sign it. In some variations, apparently you're supposed to make some reference to the U.S. Treasury or the IRS. Incidentally, that's a thing they very much do not appreciate. They've put out circulars referring to laws that make it illegal and calling the whole thing fraud. So that might not be such a great idea depending on how you feel about things like jail. I don't know, and actually doubt whether anyone has been nailed by the criminal law for this, but my advice to you watching this video is don't push them. It would appear from the form, it would appear that the form you're using is intended to call them to mind the form of a check, with your social security number being the account number. And that's consistent with the main theory behind this idea, that when anyone is born, the government or Federal Reserve or whatever creates a bank account in your name. And it is a lot like the straw man theory in that idea, right? One YouTuber compared it to playing a game of Monopoly, where each player starts off with a certain amount of money as part of the game. You are using the magic formula as your way of accessing your game money. The problem is life is not a game, and the real world does not work that way. You don't start off with money, and things are not free. I don't really have to tell you this, right? When I make things for people to use, it takes effort, and I want to get paid for that effort. When you go to work, you want to get paid. Can you imagine the outrage you would feel if at the end of the week your boss simply handed you a slip saying that your work has been accepted for value? You'd call the cops, wouldn't you? You should. And if you start returning bills with accepted for value written on them instead of including payment, you'll be seeing cops too. Duh. Getting things without the intent to pay is fraudulent. It's a crime. Applying accept for value to existing bills is just dumb and will probably result in you losing money. But planning to apply it to new bills and then going through with that and creating new bills that you don't intend to pay is criminal. This is such basic common sense and so plainly obvious that it takes a lot of study to gloss it over and forget the obvious. And the accept for value idea has a lot of theory. A lot of the videos talk about how much studying you should do before trying it. I just say don't do it. But about that theory they want you to consider, does it make any sense? Well, no. It all goes back, they say, to House Joint Resolution 192, June 5th, 1933, Public Law 73-10. You'll find a link to that a page on our site that has that law in its entirety in the description below if you'd like to see it. House Joint Resolution 192, Public Law 10, according to the Accept for Value crowd, that was the law that stole the people's gold but made up for it by making everything free. What? It is true that Joint Resolution 192 has a sordid history, but nothing quite so lame-brained as that. Joint Resolution 192, which passed in 1933, has its roots in the early 1920s and the aftermath of World War I and the Great Depression. War is expensive, and governments at war tend to spend more than they have. They make up for that by creating new money out of thin air. You may have heard that our government is doing a lot of that right now, as a matter of fact. Printing lots of new money usually causes price inflation. In the 1920s and 30s, that wasn't such a big deal in the United States, but it was a big deal in other countries. They had borrowed money for the war, but didn't want to pay the debts out of money people were earning, so they just decided to pay out of newly printed money. This caused all money to become less valuable. It diluted it, in other words. In Germany, for example, a mark went from about 1 or 2 for $1 to billions of marks per dollar. In 1921 in Germany, for example, it was cheaper to burn paper money than it was to buy logs for heat. It was a horrible time for them, and things got even worse when the Great Depression started in 1928, and you know, they stayed bad for a long time. But for now, we're just going to talk about money. The history is just to remind you that the value of government-based money was changing rapidly all over the world, going down mostly. Now, if you lend somebody $1 when a loaf of bread costs 20 cents, how do you feel about receiving one back when a loaf of bread costs 50 bucks, or 500, or 5,000, or 5 million? That's what was happening. Creditors didn't like that, and all over the world they started requiring payment either in gold, which couldn't be printed, or in currency worth a certain amount of gold. They were called gold clauses, and they were in a lot of contracts. In a way, it was fair, right, to make you pay back the same value that you had borrowed, regardless of, what the denomination said. But the problem was that so many people and governments couldn't do that, so they passed a series of laws forbidding that, called the Gold Clause laws. That happened all over the world. House Joint Resolution 192 was one of these laws. Put another way, it was a legal tender law which made all debts payable with banknotes rather than gold and required that they be denominated in dollars rather than expressed as something else. That way, you couldn't say, pay me back 50 bucks worth of gold. You pay me back an ounce of gold, or pay me back the number of dollars that would buy an ounce of gold. You had to say, pay me back $50, and that put all the risk of the currency devaluation on the creditors. It actually ripped off the creditors, and the way the Supreme Court upheld it would be an enduring lesson for anybody interested in the ways the Supreme Court works. Let's just put it that way. But it didn't make anything free for anybody. That's the fraud the acceptance for value people have added to an interesting story. Don't fall for it, and be assured that no judge ever will. Using the accepted for value argument will bring you only disaster and loss. There are better ways to protect what's yours from the debt collectors. Helping people protect their rights is what we do. Protect what's yours and don't let the debt collectors rip you off. Take action to protect yourself from the debt collectors. Help others do the same. Please like this video, share it with anybody you think could use it, subscribe, and comment, as all these things help other people find our materials. YourLegalLegUp.com